Hello and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Chatbots are all the rage these days, and invariably we are interacting with them and may not even know it. According to global IT and research and advisory firm Gartner, by 2020, 85% of our engagement with businesses will be done without interacting with another human. Instead, we'll be using self-service options and chatbots. To help us better understand what chatbots are, how they work, the implications for business and the workplace, essentially the 411 on chatbots, we are thrilled to have Kern Elliott on the show. Kern is a senior professional application support at the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited, more commonly known as iGovTT, which designs, manages, and implements enterprise-wide IT solutions for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Kern, welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot, Michelle. Hi, nice to be here. Nice to be speaking with you.
Okay, Kern, so let's kick things off with the basics. What is a chatbot?
A chatbot is simply a computer program that simulates human conversation and uses artificial intelligence. What it tries to do is try to understand the intent of a user and send a response based on some business rule or data that the organization may have. So very simply, it's just what we are accustomed doing on a day-to-day basis, chatting peer-to-peer, except you're actually speaking to a machine and not an actual human being.
Okay. And how and when are chatbots used?
Chatbots can be used in many different ways. A lot of people tend to use it more for customer service, being that front line of the customer service, that first level support. However, I've seen chatbots being used for quickening a lot of services in terms of like e-commerce, in terms of recommendations for different systems. It has actually been used in businesses where you can find out additional data while in meetings. So there are many different ways that you can actually use a chatbot. It's actually just limited, or it can only reach the limit of the human imagination. It all just depends on how that particular service can actually add value to an organization by using automation.
All right, but let me ask a question, especially for the customer care element, and probably it comes out of the Caribbean experience, especially with respect to outsourcing, where a lot of our attention in that area is in the customer care space. But I'm wondering, especially in using chatbots to engage customers, even though it's the first level of engagement, couldn't the argument be made, and I'm sure, policymakers are probably itching up to, once they realize how widely the chatbots might be deployed, could they not be taken away from jobs humans could be doing?
My question to that is yes and no. I know that's a really lame way to answer the question, but I'll explain why. It's not taking away the jobs of humans, but it's actually modifying the way that humans do that particular job. So in the area of customer service, what we have human beings doing right now is that they speak directly one-on-one with the individual for any problem that they may have. What is going to change is now that for simple problems that can be answered or automated, a bot will do that instead. And more complex problems will then come to that particular individual. So that individual now handles mostly complex problems on their day-to-day basis. And they will also have to have modified skills where they actually look to see what the bot is doing and help teach the bot to better be able to answer queries from customers. So the reason why I say yes and no is, yes, it would take away your job if the individual doesn't want to improve their skills or move with the times. But no, it's not going to ever fully replace a human being, at least not in the short term. It's not going to ever be able to fully remove the human element from customer service.
Okay, and looking at probably where chatbots might be a good fit, because I think sometimes we think that they can probably just be deployed any and everywhere. But are there companies or organizations or various industries that they might be better suited for than others?
Well, it can be used in nearly any industry and or service. I think what should really be asked is, what can the chatbot do to help any particular customer that you may have? So I've seen chatbots used in a number of different industries. For e-commerce, there is 1-800-Flowers in the United States. They sell flowers totally from an e-commerce perspective. What their chatbot actually does is that it keeps your favorite dates. So let's say you have birthdays, anniversaries, etc. It keeps those dates and reminds you like a week before, a couple of days before, so that you could order flowers and stuff for your loved ones, whatever the case may be. So that data just shows how it's useful in that type of way. Lego is another good example where they had a chatbot over the Christmas period where it actually did an entire recommendation system in terms of what would be the best Lego set to buy for a particular kid around a certain age, whether their preference is to see adventure, whether it's fantasy, sci-fi. It helps that whole entire recommendation system, or helps recommend to customers rather. So it makes it much easier for a customer to buy something rather than having to ask around as into which one might be the best product for you to buy for your particular child. So as I say, it more speaks to what service can a chatbot offer to quicken or better your service to customers rather than saying which industry that it would best suited to fit. Now, I'm not saying that every single industry can use a chatbot, but there would need to be some sort of thinking in terms of how a chatbot could better the service for a particular industry. Because I've seen it used in law where there was a chatbot that could actually help you get out of tickets in England and the United States. Yeah, I forget what's the name. I think it's Do Not Pay was the name of that chat.
Okay.
Yeah, and it actually helped over 600 and something people get out of traffic tickets. Whether it is they had a issue with the tickets, whether it had inconsistencies in what was written as what actually happened. It actually did a whole analysis of your entire problem from when you got the ticket to actually receiving it, and being able to find loopholes in the actual law to get you out of paying for that ticket. I've seen it used in insurance, where insurance what would take your information and then compare it with many different insurance agencies and give you the best deal for your particular type of insurance you're looking for, whether it's life, whether it's car insurance, boat insurance, motorcycle insurance. So they are being used over a wide different array of industries at this moment in time. But what I think a lot of people tend to do when they now start with bots is that they try to take their FAQs and turn that into a bot. And yes, while we are doing that right now at iGovTT, that is not necessarily the best way to move forward. It's a little different for government because there's always a lot of government information that is missing from the public eye that they need to get, especially when it comes to different processes. But a general company, FAQs are not usually the most useful thing that a customer wants to get quickly. Usually it's something attached to the service or product that you're actually delivering.
Definitely. Actually, all that you've said has kicked up two questions for me. The first one, though, is explain to us or give us a sense as to how chatbots can be deployed, because I guess initially one would typically think of the chatbots as the sort of messenger platform where you would, see probably you go on a site and then this, the box opens asking whether or not they can help you and so on. But then when you're talking about 1-800-Flowers, it spoke about emails being sent to remind people about, loved ones milestones that were eminent and so on. So how are the different ways in which you can deploy a chat box? Because I think we think of it primarily as some sort of messaging service, for example, on when you visit websites.
Well, with 1-800-Flowers, it does nothing with email except give you your receipts when you pay. They do everything within Facebook Messenger itself. So what I would say in deploying any particular chatbot, the first thing that you have to think about is where would your chatbot live? Would it live on your website or would it live on social media? I mean, there are other chat systems that you can use like Telegram and stuff, but because they're not as popular within the Caribbean, I'll kind of leave those out for now. So I'll just focus on like Facebook Messenger and your website. So that's the first question that you'll actually have to think about. Do you want it to live on your website or do you want it to live within Facebook Messenger or social media? And there are pros and cons to both sides. Pros being for social media is that you can always reach back out to that person after they have contacted your bot. On the website, it's a little more difficult to do that for obvious technical reasons. Mainly because you're always signed into social media. So I always know where I can go and reach you compared to a website where you actually go on and offline and your IP addresses and stuff change. Another thing about starting off with deploying a chatbot, again, you have to look at what service your company actually provides. So when I say what service your company actually provides, I'll use the example of iGovTT. What we did at first to see what we needed to do or what we can actually automate is that we started with a live chat solution. In the live chat solution, what we did is we made certain services available and told customers that, yeah, you can actually come to this place to find out information for government. And after about 2 to 3 months, we actually analyzed that data to find out what were the most common questions being asked and was it something that we can actually automate so that customers no longer have to stand in a queue or send an email and wait for a response to be able to better get service. So one of the services that we actually automated was to reset your TT Connect ID password. And instead of someone having to go into a queue to get their password reset, they would actually go to the bot and ask the bot, hey, I would like to reset my TT Connect ID. The bot will then ask them for their ID. And then when they put it in, they get an email stating that their password is going to be reset. And a few minutes later, they would actually get that password reset for them. So it actually saves time in terms of trying to access a particular service. Instead of going to a queue or making a phone call or making an email, we actually cut that particular process from being about 48 hours in total, something that could actually happen within maybe 1 to 2 hours. So I think in deploying a chatbot, it's not about just the technology part of it, and this is cool, but actually looking at your services and see how a chatbot could help automate a particular service to bring, again, better service to your customers. And that is where I think that process in what we did with iGovTT is a good example of how you can actually start off with a live chat system, going into a chatbot system, and seeing how you can improve your business.
Okay. And now, outside, I guess, whether or not within TT, the iGovTT and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, for the chatbots that you have installed and are managing, what has been the response by consumers?
Well, the response has been varied. The reason why I'll say it's varied is that for every chatbot system I've ever implemented or seen persons have implemented, the first thing that every person tries to do is actually try to break the chatbot in terms of asking questions definitely will not be able to answer.
Okay.
So that will always be a problem that you'll get. So we know that this chatbot, let's use the example of 1-800-Flowers. You know that 1-800-Flowers is about ordering flowers and stuff like that. But then you will ask the chatbot, how old are you? Or what is the meaning of life? Right? So that's the first thing that every single individual, at least the majority of them, will try to do. They will try to break the chatbot. I don't know if it's to prove that they are smarter than the chatbot or whatever the case may be. I can't really say what's the mindset behind it. But that's common. I've even seen articles where people are actually stating on a general basis that, yeah, these are things that they face on a daily basis. Someone is always trying to prove or make sure that the bot cannot answer their questions. So that's one response you'll get. There'll be other responses where you have customers that actually don't get directly to the point. So you know that you want to get, for example, you want to get your TT Connect ID reset. You know that's what you want to do. However, when they ask you what do you like or what service you'd like to have today, you will go through the entire course of, well, yesterday I tried to log into my TT Connect ID and it wasn't working. So I tried to reset it for myself and it didn't work that time. So I decided to come here. So now with that whole paragraph of information that comes in there, we may be able, as humans, be able to, decipher and go through and finally find out what service they actually want. However, for a bot, that is a ton of information to go through, and more than likely, it will not be able to answer your question, right? Even though it's as simple as I want to reset my TTI ID, but just because of how they put it across, it's difficult for a bot, unless you have trained it with many different instances of the same question, be able to answer that question. So this goes back to the point of if humans will actually be replaced by chatbots, and this is the main reason why I would say no, because, or at least not at this point, because there's still a lot of training that needs to go into making a bot understand the different nuances of how persons will answer a question. And then you'll have those who appreciate the technology. They will ask their question direct. If they don't get the response that they expect, we actually have where if you don't get a response after you try twice, if you don't get the response you expect, we actually forward you or carry you across to a human or a live chat agent so they will get help with your query. And we have a lot of customers who actually appreciate that. So they actually learn how to use the bot better. So when they come back to use the service, they know what to ask. And they also appreciate that we are not just leaving them out there to dry when they don't get their problem solved, that we're actually sending you directly to a human being after they get their problem solved. And then, well, the last set of persons are those who will just get frustrated and, well, curse words will fly across the screen and all that. So you have like 4 different types of persons you encounter on a daily basis while using chatbots. But in the case of iGovTT, as I said, we have like a 64% acceptance rate. So it's not actually too bad. And it's good to see that people are actually learning and appreciating technology a bit more compared to when we actually launched it the first time.
Okay. Actually, I guess 64% is pretty good, all things considered, because I wanted to also understand generally whether or not people were actually using the platform, relatively speaking. And certainly coming out of our sort of Caribbean culture where we love to talk, the extent to which we were actually prepared to write, whether, texting or whatever, our issues, and being able to engage the platform primarily in that respect.
Yeah, people are using. In fact, we kind of force you to use the chatbot initially. So usually when you try to access certain services, we send you directly to the bot first. And then if the bot can't answer the question, then we send you to a human agent. So we kind of, for lack of a better word at this point in time, force you to use it. So that we can not only because we want you to get accustomed to technology, but also because we want to be able to better train the bot so that eventually we could put it to use in other services, especially with the idea that we have right now within iGovTT, where we want to have bots for nearly any government ministry, so that we no longer have this, we don't know where to go to find information. You can actually know where to go and how to get information about government and government services, whether it is you access iGovTT's website, the TT Connect portal, or some other websites that belongs to another ministry. So it's all in building up to create a much larger, better service delivery to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to using chatbot. So there has to be at some point where people have to interact with this application so that it can be better serve you in the long term.
Understood. And I mean, one of the early statements that you made was about the fact that the chatbot basically is built on artificial intelligence. So it means that to a considerable degree, it should be learning from its experiences. How can one ensure that the bot is learning well, and how can that be monitored?
With most chatbot systems, there tend to be some analytics attached to it, where you will actually see on a daily basis what questions they were able to answer or how it was answered, and what questions they had absolutely no response for. So, for example, on one particular day, what I will have to do is go through nearly step by step, nearly every single interaction that the bot had, and check to see, well, hey, did it answer this question correctly? And if it did, basically tell it, yes, this is the correct answer. I answered this question incorrectly, I didn't know how to, then you actually point it to what should actually be done. So it is a tedious process, but it gets simpler and simpler as more data comes in, and you're able to give the bot more data for it to be able to sample to create its responses for. So that's basically how the machine learning goes. It's kind of like a a trial and error type learning, where it tries to do something on its own, then you tell it, no, this is what it should do. And the reason why you should do it this way is because we have certain keywords in it. So let's say reset TT Connect ID is within that statement, then the person really wants to have the intent of resetting their TT Connect ID. So you send them to this particular process. So it's that whole trial and error process that you have to be going through on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
So it's really not about, well, at least whether or not it's for the bots that iGovTT has deployed, that somehow the bot is automatically learning, but there's human intervention that is guiding it to determine what might be the correct responses and so on, to add to its library of responses and questions, and therefore that is how it is essentially learning, as opposed to just it being somehow magically happening automatically.
Yeah, there's no magic behind it. Actually, there's a lot of human interaction, and you tend to see it a lot too with a lot of reports that we are getting now with Amazon having humans listening to the responses that they're getting off their Alexa devices. Same thing with Facebook. And yes, it's a privacy issue and that's an ethical issue that is something that we'll discuss on another time. But that actually shows that there needs to be a human element there to actually program these bots to be better. So that's why, again, pointing back to the same question from before, if humans will be replaced, no. Humans will just need to modify their particular job sets at this point in time to help this application do their service quicker. Yeah.
Okay, and because even just this whole issue now about manpower, I guess we spoke primarily about it as, maybe like your customer care agents somehow losing their jobs. But you are also indicating that the chatbot in and of itself, I mean, it doesn't work in isolation, and it requires a lot of human support to actually help it to function well and to become more robust. What might be some of the other assumptions people tend to make about chatbots that certainly we should probably draw to their attention and hopefully disabuse them of?
I think one of the biggest assumptions that people think about chatbots is that they compare to what they know from everyday life. So they will compare to something like Google Assistant or Siri, or whatever the case may be, those smart assistants.
Mm-hmm.
There are fundamental difference between the two. a chatbot is essentially a service or intelligent, and I put that in quotes, service where it actually only has information based on this one organization or what was taught for it from this one organization. When it comes to a Google Assistant, that has a whole neural network behind it that has all Google search information and stuff added from encyclopedias and Wikipedia and all these other aspects and different types of data to better answer your question. So if you ask the Google Assistant, how old are you? Right? It may be able to come up with some answer based on maybe understanding that the Google Assistant was actually started in 2011, just for example.
Mm-hmm.
The chatbot will not know how to answer that question actually. And you can maybe program it to have some kind of witty response, say maybe like I'm 1 year old, but I'm still smarter than you, or something funny like that.
Right.
But it still has to be something that's programmed. When the Google Assistant works in a totally different way in terms of pulling information from different data sources. Now, Google has used or has given a lot of its tech to normal everyday persons. So there is an application called, it was API AI before, but now it's named Dialogflow, where it does some of that in terms of you being able to take a document and basically give it to the chatbot, and it actually analyzes the document to be able to better answer questions. Yeah, so you get sort of that same feeling from a Google Assistant where it's pulling from many different data sets, but it's still limited again because of the amount of data that's being fed to it. Another assumption about chatbots that persons don't seem to get is that at this point in time, chatbots can only handle simple requests and nothing overly complex. A chatbot will not be able to basically drill down a problem. It doesn't have the intelligence of a human being. So it's not able to drill down a problem till you actually find what the actual problem is. Most of the times it will actually have to be a 2-step or 3-step process where you can actually go through to actually answer your question. Right? So, for example, I use the example of that person who is speaking, giving you the whole life story of what they actually went through before asking what the actual question is. And that is actually the worst thing that can actually give given to a bot, and you expect it to be able to give it a response. So in knowing that, what a person needs to do in building a chatbot is try as much as possible to simplify what the person is actually talking to the bot about. And there are different ways of doing that. There are like quick links, so you can actually choose, let's say it asks you a question of what service you would like today, and then you will have a couple of quick links or buttons where it will say, I want to reset my TTNet ID, I want to know what's the opening hours of our service center, I want to know where I can go to renew my driver's permit, for example.
Right.
And when they press on that, you now in the background basically telling chatbot, hey, what they want to do is reset their TTNet ID. And then you can start the process in doing that, instead of having to go through the entire process of trying to figure out, or a person trying to figure out what they need to tell the bot to get the service that they want. So basically, those are the things that I think a lot of people have a wrong assumption about with chatbots, thinking that it's like super intelligent and connected to everything on the internet. That's not true. And it's also not true that it can answer overly complex questions in its unstructured state.
Right.
You'll actually break up the actual structure for it to fully understand and be capable of answering the question that a person may have.
Okay. And what type of investment? And I guess clearly that would depend on certainly the size of the operation. But if you can just give us a sense as to the type of investment that would be needed to have a well-functioning chatbot. And I recognize, though, that there might be the initial costs as well as the ongoing costs, and whether or not you can quantify that or give us a sense as to what would be the considerations, the factors that would need to be taken into account to come up with those sorts of figures.
I can tell you where it comes to come up with those figures. Again, it will vary in terms of where the bot actually sits. Platforms that are on the web tend to be cheaper compared to those that are on social media. Because on social media, there's a lot more functionality and a lot more rules that you need to follow compared to those that are just on our website. So that's one that would differentiate the cost. Two, what we'll go into also is, well, of course, the manpower. You having to assign time to not only program the bots in terms of what it has to do, but that daily, everyday processing of what mistakes it made, how to rectify those mistakes, etc. So I would say, if I want to give like a weekly rundown of how much it will be, other than paying for the platform, you would actually have to then put efforts into finding out what service is best used for the bot, then actually building out that bot service, then that entire ongoing process of learning, unlearning, and learning, congratulating for when it's actually working. I would say an investment anywhere from, and I'm talking TT dollars here, I say an initial investment of about maybe like about 10,000 to 20,000, depending on the complexity of the bot that you're using, and also the amount of persons you have that could actually dedicate time to improving the bot itself.
Okay.
That's the initial investment. Yeah.
So I guess probably between like 1,500 and maybe 3,500 US dollars. Like that's just very, very, back of envelope sort of figures. Because, and also just in line with that, one really needs to spend some time customizing whatever the product is, because I think sometimes one might think that bots are being used and applied by many companies and organizations, but the skills that might be required to configure the bot initially as well as to maintain it on an ongoing basis, what sort of expertise might one need to have?
I mean, there are expertise that you would need. As I said, most bot platforms, you don't need to do any heavy programming. So I think what is needed is, more than anything, is someone who can actually see and understand what the bots can offer, more than actually needing to hire somebody who's specific to a chatbot. So and this is from my recommendation, actually, and I could be wrong, obviously, but my recommendation is not to go out and look for a chatbot expert per se, right? Or if you're looking for a chatbot expert, it's somebody who can help guide the organization in terms of helping to build it, and eventually the organization then runs with it when it fully understands what it's doing and how they can go about improving it. So that will be the only time I think you need a chatbot expert. But there needs to be someone in the organization leading it in terms of understanding what the chatbot can offer to customers. It's like a social media marketer, how they understand how social media works and what content should be put up for your organization for it to get the traction and the engagement that you want, right? Sure, we have social media experts now because they understand how the system works. But until bots get more popular, I don't think that there will be a chatbot expert unless you're working in someone who actually does that full time. So organization, they need to have that person who could understand what the chatbot could actually bring to the table and be able to work with it at that point. So I would actually use the social media person to actually help build that out, because they understand engagement and what the customer is looking for. They understand the customer to that point. So for me, the marketing department or the business department or the department that engages in helping the customer should be those who actually should lead a chatbot development or chatbot improvement strategy, more than someone going out there to look for a chatbot expert to hire on a full-time basis. A chatbot expert should just be there for implementation, helping you all, guide you all, and then basically press on. You go ahead and we have it from here.
Excellent. Okay, so can we wind it down? I think I just have about 2 more questions. What do you think is the future of chatbots? I mean, here it is, we're saying it's all the rage, but do you think it's a fad?
I don't think it's a fad. I think it's a stepping stone onto something else. For me, chatbots actually are a step forward from both apps and email. So what it does differently from apps is that I no longer have to install this particular application to get service from it. And for email, it's no longer a way to broadcast or consistently hit you at this email address all the time. It's now a personalized area that a business can speak to you, just like as you speak to someone on a normal day-to-day basis on WhatsApp. So I think chatbots it's not really a fad, but it's a step on to go on to different avenues. And I think the next avenue that we're going to will actually be voice. I think that voice bots, and I put that in quotes, will be the next big thing. There are a lot of Alexa devices around, a lot of Google Nest hubs and stuff around. And bit by bit, they're getting better in terms of understanding voice and be able to provide services. And voice tends to be the simplest way, or I should say the most known, easy way to communicate. The first way you learn to communicate is actually speaking. So that, for me, will be where next chatbots will go to. Will be someone totally done via you speaking to a bot and it being able to respond to you via voice. We basically have it kind of going on already, but totally replacing most of the text systems that we have right now.
Okay. And my final question, and essentially it's going to asking us to distill some of the points that we would have raised and discussed earlier on. If someone were to come to you and say, Kern, I want to have a chatbot in my business, how do I go about it? Mm-hmm. What might be some of the steps that you'd suggest that they take in terms of, getting from where they are, which is just coming to you and saying that they would like to have a chatbot in their organization, right, to help, to get them going, putting them on the right path? What are some of the questions you think they need to ask, and what steps you think they need to take?
Well, the first thing I would definitely ask is if they understand what a chatbot is and what it does. I think you need to fully understand that, and maybe even do some research in terms of what are the better bots that they have in existence right now to fully understand what a chatbot is. So that'll be my first go-to. The second thing I would ask is, what process are you looking to automate or make quicker? As I said, a lot of persons start off with chatbots being basically your website in a chat form. And that is not normally what the customer wants. They actually want to get access to your service or product quicker, or recommendations into what product will be the best one to buy. So I think telling the particular person to take a look at their organization and see what are the aspects that a chatbot could help automate and improve customer service. I also want to let them know that they're getting into something that they'll have to constantly update. It's not a website where you can update every month and it's fine, because most of the data is static. This is something that people are going to be coming to get service, and a high amount of times, or a high percentage of times, they may get not the answer that they want. And you have to consistently update the bot with more data and more training to become better. So that they have a resource that's dedicated to actually improving the bots. And the last thing I would go into is actually stating what my price would be.
Wonderful. I guess to help them on their journey to having a well deployed chatbot.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about only just making money. I actually love the idea of chatbots and what they can do. I work in technology, and I'm accustomed to everybody saying, "Hey, let's get an app for this. Let's develop an app. Let's develop an app." And app development is actually very expensive. Yes, it's not as expensive as it was before, due to technology getting better as usual, but it's still very expensive. And what a lot of people don't take into consideration with apps is that I still have to convince a person to download this app on my phone. And a lot of people now kind of at ease, or they have a sense of comfort of the apps that they currently use. They don't download apps as much as they may have maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
Usually the apps that are on your phone now are what you're going to be using for the next couple of years. So the advantage of a chatbot then will be that you can actually now piggyback off of something that you're already using to give service to a customer. And that to me is the most exciting part of it, is that I can actually go into Facebook Messenger, find your company, and get service. And then you could keep that relationship open as a company, in terms of being able to say, hey, just like 1-800-Flowers does, hey, when is your anniversary? I'll keep this in mind so that I ensure that that you send flowers on a particular day. So you know how it could be if you don't do anything on an anniversary for your significant other. Oh, yeah, how a lot of bacchanal could happen there.
Right.
So basically saving a life, for lack of a better term, right? So being useful without me having to remember a website URL, without me having to download another app, without me having to hoping to get the email because it doesn't go into spam, or if Google decides to put it in one of those other tabs and you don't get a notification for it, right? That to me is the brilliance behind a chatbot, being able to get service without doing actually anything much more. I don't need to add anything to my phone or anything like that. And the last thing that I really love about chatbots is that it is a 24/7 thing. It never goes offline.
Mm-hmm.
I can go to a chatbot at midnight and ask it information and get that particular service. So that speaks to the same on-demand service delivery that we are accustomed now. I mean, if you have Netflix, you don't want to go and watch a Netflix program when it's on between 7 and 9. You want to be able to watch it whenever you have the free time to do so. And chatbots afford you to actually get service whenever you want it, not whenever the business is available.
Excellent. And on that note, thank you so much, Kern. This was a very enlightening discussion, and I think we have given our listeners the foundation of chatbots and how to approach them, and some of the benefits and considerations should they be looking at deploying it in their own businesses, but certainly even as customers, to appreciate that there are limitations, but also when they're well deployed, they can be a useful first step in efficiently being engaged by the organization that you're trying to have a connection with, and hopefully that there is this requisite support and intelligence that is behind the chatbot to make it work better and efficiently. So thank you so much, Kern.
Hey, no problem. Always willing to talk about technology. So it was great having this conversation with you.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com, or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.